Strap in, you cool cats. We're going for a screenwriter's journey, day 136. We'll see how much of this I can record at once. It's a pretty long day. December 4th is the day I'm writing this, and January 15th is the day that I'm recording it. So it looks like I took a few days off because it seems like the last one was the 29th or something. All right, so where are we? So big long conversation between Holly and Rachel when I'm trying to set up the whole dynamics of the fact that they have been in talks with each other and that basically Holly is going to get Rachel kind of signed out, for lack of a better term, of the witness security program so she can come and see her daughter. And then there's a scene with Holly and her supervisor to set up the fact that she's going to be gone. I don't know 100% for sure that that scene is needed. So now I'm going through and doing just a little bit of work on this scene where we establish that Jake and I don't think Jake and Luke had ever met Holly, although that seems unlikely if they've been dating. I need to think about that. All right. So here we are. Wow, this is it's sort of virgin writing, as I like to say it. I should trademark that term for no apparent reason, like I'm loving it, right? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. They've been using that music, I bet, for 25 years. I wonder how much that guy or gal who came up with that. It's like 4 notes. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Oh, it's 5 notes. All right. So I'm just, I love it when I go back and start tweaking things and I kind of lose my place in my voiceover. But sometimes that happens, right? You just, and I've talked about this before, you change one line of dialogue because you realize either it's a continuity thing or a logic thing or a story thing or whatever. And then you're like, oh, that's nice. And then you say, oopsie, I got to go back there in that scene where so-and-so and so-and-so. And because this changed, I got to change that. Sometimes you'll get through a whole script and you'll go, oh, it's done. And then when you read it again, you'll realize that you made a change and you didn't account for it. And sometimes it's a very small deal. Sometimes it's a big deal. But it can be sort of a bummer when, especially if you ever send it out because you think it's good to go. Hopefully not to an important person, but just like for peer review. And then someone says, hey, on page 63, something happens and I just don't understand it. And then you have to go back and figure out what you did. Anyways. Okay. So when I started this Operation Surgical Strike, which I think I called it at the time, the plan was by the time they got to this championship racetrack, everything would sort of be back to how it was in the previous version of the script. And true confessions, I knew I was pretty much kidding myself, and I knew that probably wouldn't happen, but I don't know if I was kidding myself or fooling myself. I don't know if there's a difference between the two, but I was. Although this is pretty much the same as how it was about having to keep secrets and all of that stuff. I think that was pretty close. Please don't tell me I'm not the only one. So Lexi is wondering how many others like her there are that Holly has sort of looked after and, not really mentored, but sort of been there for. So now Lexi's realizing about possibly Holly did this because she felt sorry for her. And so sometimes you get done writing a scene and you realize, yes, that moved the story forward, but then you realize there's no conflict. And really, unless it's just pure exposition, like on a TV police procedural where literally every line is exposition, you learn very little about the characters on any given show. Once in a while you do, but in a screenplay, you've got to move the story along. You've got to tell the story, but you need conflict. And sometimes you get done writing a scene and you realize, wow, that was, super happy, jolly. And I've said it before, and I didn't come up with this, but I think someone talked about mad, glad, sad, and what was the other one? Angry? There's basically 4 emotions. And if you start with glad, you should end up with sad, or you go from sad to mad. Mad and angry are the same, but I know there were 3 that were basically negative and only 1 that was positive. I'll have to look back and see, but so now we're talking about her real dad. Lexi is there in the middle of 23. And now Holly gives this, for me, sort of a big, long, not really a speech, but she's got 6 lines and then a beat, and she's got 3 more. And this is kind of crap. I'm just going to put it out there. This is one of those. It's not quite cringeworthy, maybe, but geez, And then it ends like really syrupy. I'm glad I was yours. Me too. So it's just too nice of a scene. It's just a bunch of information, but I don't think it works very well. So hopefully I'm going to fix that. Okay. So now we go back to the other car, and whoops, we're going back to the other car, and they're complaining about how fast they're going. Wait a minute, I'm changing all kinds of stuff here. So Jake and Luke know that she's going to meet her mom. They're questioning if that's a good idea. We've got 3 questions in a row there. No surprise there. So we know that Luke and Jake kind of think alike based on that line at the end of 24. It just, gosh, and maybe when I comment on the stuff that I've just written, I'll say the same thing, but some of this just kind of feels juvenile, like the writing. The dialogue I'm not crazy about. And I think one of the comments that the mentor, if I can call him that, made was just that you can't solve story and character problems with clever dialogue. It could be good dialogue. It could be sparkling, delicious dialogue, but that's not the same as, and it doesn't have to be, vulgar, gritty, whatever, but it has to be real. And sometimes I believe, it feels like my volume needs to go up a little. Sometimes I feel like I believe that I'm writing good dialogue, but it's kind of clever good instead of story good or character good. But then again, I have to admit, I've heard a lot of I've made the movies, but I've heard a lot of my dialogue read like in table reads, and it sounds good, and I get good feedback from the people who are reading it, and they have no vested interest in loving it. So I don't know. I know you guys never leave comments, but maybe someday you will when some world changes or whatever. All right, what are we doing here? So they're trying to figure out what Holly does for a living, and all right. So I think this is like the first time I'm trying to introduce this idea of Luke and Jake. They're not like right-wing, far-right conspiracy theorist believers and like fringe crazy people who believe in, we didn't really go to the moon. Although I don't know if that's a right-wing thing or not, or flat earthers or whatever. But they definitely, and I'll admit it, they are on the right side of things. I'll say they're on the conservative side of things. And I'm purposely doing that because I just am. It's not a huge, big political thing, but I think it will hopefully set up stuff that maybe happens later and how they act and react. And I'm not ashamed to do it. Everyone does not have to be a liberal, woke person in a movie. And maybe you'll stop watching these because I said that. But well, I could go way into that, but I won't. Okay, so Jake and Luke are kind of going back and forth. Abby is just like, she is obviously dating Luke, so she has some ideas of kind of where his maybe political leanings lie, or some of the stuff he's done or said in the past. And it's not like she's a flaming liberal or a flaming leftist or a flaming rightist. She just is not super into this sort of thing and is like way over it and is like, oh, come on, let's just don't even go there. And then I throw in the Louder with Crowder reference. For those of you who don't know, you need to watch at least one, see what you think. But I don't know that would stay in the script necessarily. So basically they're kind of postulating obviously what Holly is really up to, who she is, where she works, where she works for, is she good, is she bad, etc. And that, again, sort of, it doesn't really set things up. It kind of foreshadows in a little way, but it's just kind of a way of saying that these two guys obviously are correct in that she is, they're not going to guess that she's a U.S. deputy marshal or a deputy U.S. marshal, but they're kind of going down the right path. So I'm getting a little deep into the weeds, as is typical when you're doing, especially virgin writing, trademark pending, and you're exploring a new part of the story, a new part of a character, and then next thing you know, you've got 2.5 pages of dialogue, and you know that you're 50% over budget for the scene. And so yeah, this is obviously way on the nose, and I'm sure this will not stand. But sometimes you have to do that, and then you can sort of dial it back and pick out the good things, either the actual dialogue, or you can sort of pick out the thoughts and the ideas you're trying to get across, and then reword them and cut. And of course, I'm always looking at the page count, which is 115, which, I mean, it's now... I haven't broken any laws by any means, but obviously I'm going to try to slice that down a little bit. So, a long weekend. So again, it's hard to be objective, obviously, with your own material. Although I try to be, I think I call a piece of crap when I see it. But all right, so here we are. So this is actually the scene as it was written in the previous script, the version. And so, as I said, my idea was kind of by the time I got here, it would be like, it's all melded together and I don't have to do anything. I'll just go straight to the fade out. And but so here they go, they come, and immediately I start making changes. And as I talked about the domino effect, when you're changing one line of dialogue and then you got to go back and change another, typically when you start off a scene or you get fairly early on into the scene and you start changing dialogue, that's a good sign that you're going to end up rewriting the whole scene. All right, let's see here. Yeah, so, in the previous one, the sort of the thing was that Holly had gotten the call and she was going to go and do the Supreme Court special security detail, whatever. And so that's why she was talking to Jake about, are you here for her in the long term? So I'm doing a little rewriting here. Scrutinizes. Again, you got different adjectives. Study or scrutinize? Should he ponder or consider or wonder? Should she look puzzled or bemused or curious? Sometimes when instead of doing question answer, sometimes you can have someone postulate based on everything they know at that point. It could be based on speculation. And sometimes that can work, even though everything the person says may not be true, and it may not come from a big basis in fact, but it's obviously a way to get inside their head a little and see what the person is thinking at any given time, which is obviously what's happening at the top of 28 with Lexi. This is, I don't like this really. It's rendered me speechless, which you probably don't mind. She drug up my real mom. So, I don't even know why I wrote this, frankly, because I don't think it really fits the narrative. I don't think it fits the story. And of course, on the one hand, it's Lexi kind of speculating and projecting, that's the word I was looking for, her kind of emotions and maybe insecurities. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be correct because it's just saying what she's thinking. So I'm not saying it's the world's worst scene. And obviously it is going to lead to some sort of a conflict or raising the stakes, ticking clock, good news, bad news. But she's sort of putting her cards out there and they're not necessarily the right cards, so to speak. But again, I'm just sort of trying this. I don't know that at the time I wrote this, I said, yep, that's it. Concrete, done, move on. Of course, at the time you write, I think that's probably what you think, unless you're purposely just writing something to get it on the page and then you continue on. But I've said before, I very rarely do I purposely just spew out dialogue to get to the next scene. I mean, you can see by the way I write and go over and over that I'm obviously trying to get it right, spelled the other way. And now all of this stuff, of course, I go, I got to get rid of all that. Then there's a little conversation between Jake and Holly, which I kind of, I like. But sometimes you have dialogue that works really well, and then again you go back and change something that leads up to it, and it's like, oh, I got to get rid of my good dialogue now. Okay. So they're being shown the safety procedures, blah, 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 and obviously that is not important. It's more part of the tension and the discomfort that is going on between them, which foreshadows a little bit the race itself. Obviously, it's literally, jockeying for position and racing and kind of getting their aggression out. or their frustration maybe. So I changed this a little, and Holly is obviously going to get into the race also. Oh, whoa, what's going on here? Uh-oh. Isn't that weird? I wonder if I'm not looking. I have a feeling that I had written for 40 minutes or whatever, then I quit and I've come back, and now it may be later in that same day and I realized that I got to go back. This is so crazy when I do this. Going back and making these little cosmetic changes. So we still have the idea that Rachel has told Lexi, who is girl at this point, that Holly is her aunt. Another spoiler alert, that may change. The car seat. So I like that. Ever ridden without a car seat? Holly kind of enticing her. The girl asks her mom, and Rachel makes it a big treat by saying, "Just this once." Okay, ready for a big adventure. So I can't tell if I'm making any substantial changes. It feels like this is maybe going on a bit too long. I would say that. Your voice definitely does not get as tired when you don't talk for 30 seconds here and there. So I have that line, "You'll see mommy soon," which at this point the audience doesn't know 100% for sure if she's lying, if she thinks they are going to, or they really are going to. And then, of course, as you just saw, I changed it to "we both are," which could mean to the little girl that we're both ready for our adventure. To the mom, it means my adventure is going to be completely different than yours. And that's one of those lines that when she says it, who knows if the audience is going to go, "Oh, I bet I know what she's really saying." And then when Rachel says, "Get me out of here," it kind of takes rips the Band-Aid off. So now we're in the car. I literally can't believe I'm going back and rewriting this. I mean, this is that same day that I was way up to the go-kart thing, and now I'm coming back here. But I say I can't believe it, but I do it all the time. I just did it again today, and more often than not, it works out for the best. It's sort of like, this is probably a horrible analogy, it just came to me. If you have really long hair and you're getting a haircut, the barber will start, I don't know about women, but the place I go, and I guess I haven't had really long hair for a long time, but you go to a place and the barber will cut. But then before he finishes, or she, we'll say he, because the guy who cuts my hair is a guy, he'll go back and, snip a little, just take a few pieces off here. And it's like, why don't you just get done with a haircut and then you can go back and do the trimming up? But it's not the way it works. And in a screenplay, at least for me, and I've said this many times over the course of 136 days, that's crazy. That I don't know that I've ever just written a script. Maybe in my very early days I did, just wrote it, fade in to fade out, and then went back and started fixing it. As you see here, I mean, I've literally, I would be disgusted if I went back to count how many times I've rewritten this first 10 pages, let alone the rest of the script. I wonder on any given script with any given writer, if the first 10 to 20 pages, the first act, is the most worked on and rewritten. Certainly if it's purely a spec script and you got to make sure not only grammatically and structurally and all that, but story-wise, character-wise, it's just absolutely a knockout the first 10 pages, because sometimes that way you can get some brownie points, and people will be more likely to read more of the script. They sort of are invested in it, and you build up capital, so to speak, some goodwill, and then maybe they'll forgive it. And I've had this experience with my own scripts and with other people's scripts, that you read 5 pages, 10 pages, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's just literally hard to do it. It just pains you to read it. Which reminds me, I owe somebody 3 scripts of hers that I have to read. Oh, I gotta email her. So now I'm trying to figure out, now that I've introduced the social worker, which I don't know if this draft I did, I wasn't really paying attention. What exactly the deal is going to be with Holly. You know, she's sort of making a commitment. She says once in a while, and, you know, is that going to be once a week, once a month, once a year? So there's a little back and forth with her and the social worker, which I don't know. I don't know if that's something that would really happen, if the social worker would sort of take offense, or she's just surprised, or maybe she's seen it before where someone promises to, you know, stay in touch, just like with friends, you know, when you move away, or a former coworker and then you don't. If the social worker is just worried about Lexi and how that whole thing will go if she gets disappointed. Excuse me. So then Holly and Paul have this conversation, which I don't think it's changed too much. Then we go, here we are in the present day. Introduce the twins. We see Abby and Lexi, of course, in their current ages. I mean, in terms of the dialogue here, it's not horrible if what came before is going to stay, but it's not super on the nose, I don't think. Like my nose right here. Oh, why did I do that? But I don't know. I mean, I'm speechless. I'm just trying to think if I really dislike it in and of itself, or because I think the scene has to change, or because of obviously what I've written more recently that may or may not change what's written here. I don't know. You know, this is the first time you meet Jake and Luke, and how much of their character is being revealed through what we're looking at. Excuse me. Wow, that was a long yawn. Hard to say, really. All right, but sorry, my mind is wandering. I hear my wife walking upstairs, and I wonder what's going on. So we're back. So she gets the call from Holly. Holly tells her they got to meet, blah, blah, blah. They go to the food truck. So now this is the inciting incident. This is the catalyst in the famous 10 to 12 page / minute where something happens to the protagonist. He or she gets news, you know, it could be whatever. But as I commented on before, Holly is the protagonist, and yet she is delivering this news to Lexi. And she's telling her this whole backstory, which, I mean, it isn't bad, and maybe it could still work. I don't know. Obviously, if Lexi was the main character, which maybe you could argue she is, but it would probably be a tough argument. But I don't know that it works for the protagonist to deliver this news to. She's not really a supporting character. I mean, I guess she is. She's a co-star or something, featured. The Chicago outfit, really, I did look that up, and that's like the name of one of the organized crime families in Chicago. So let's see if I change much here or not. I still have this whole backstory that Holly's giving out, and it's too long. It's definitely too long. She got 8 lines of dialogue there, and then she got several more here. Oops, I just made it 7 lines. Regardless, I don't know when I'm going to realize. It would be interesting if I did all my voiceovers like almost as I wrote, or when I got done writing, then I did the voiceover for them that same day or the next day. I think I've done that once or twice, and it sure is different than looking back 6 weeks, almost 6 weeks later, or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever, when you've got some objectivity, plus you've written other stuff. And I think it makes me a lot harder on what I wrote before, which is probably good. Seeing the changes I make, and obviously the goal is when I'm writing and rewriting and when I'm commenting to say, wow, that really works well. Wow, that really works well. And just, go through the script and all I'm doing is fixing typos or something. All right. But right now, we've got Holly spewing kind of out. I mean, it's not hideous, but she's giving all this information to Lexi, and then nothing substantial is changing. I'm just doing little bits and pieces to justify why they waited until she was 18. And obviously this is a lot for Lexi to take in. And so I'm thinking about that as I'm writing, of how would a 18-year-old react? And would it matter, if she had, as she does now, despite what happened to her with her mom, she's had a pretty solid, stable upbringing with the one family for 12 years. And so how is that going to affect how she reacts to this news that she hears? How invested in the idea of seeing and meeting her real mom, not meeting her, reuniting with her, I guess, is she going to be? And I'm thinking to myself, does it benefit the story to have Lexi be a more kind of damaged goods? I don't want her to be the typical, either strung out or, she's prostituting herself or she's on drugs or all those cliches. But should she be a little bit more damaged goods? So maybe she's a little more dependent on Holly when something goes wrong. She blames Holly because she looks up to her so much. Or does Holly really pride herself in having been a part of Lexi's life? Which I think is where I want to go, because right now Lexi is the product of a pretty stable upbringing, which may not lend itself to the conflict to come. I don't know if that made any sense or not, but hopefully it did. So this is quite a bit of exposition that, sometimes, well, I guess early on in the script, there's no crawl at the beginning. I was just watching the Eternals. I watched about 25 minutes of it and then gave up, at least for now. It's not horrible, but it started out with a crawl, which I guess it really needed, like Star Wars and so many others, where you're literally in a different world, a different universe. although the Eternals does take place in on Earth. What was I talking about? Exposition. So we're kind of in the debate section now, and really it's still exposition because they're just talking, and the debate again to me has got to be Holly debating with herself, is this the right thing to do? The idea of taking Lexi to see her mom and everything that she's laid the groundwork for over these many years, and now it's really happening, and is she having second thoughts? So it's so weird that I just went back and started doing this. I usually do it if I get to a point in the script where I feel like I'm stuck, and then I'll work on that part. And if I just can't get past it, it's sort of like when you're it could be shoveling or snow blowing or snow plowing, snow throwing, whatever, your driveway. And if it's like 4, 5, 6 inches and it's pretty powdery snow, you can just go whoop right down your driveway. But if it gets kind of wet and dense, you've got to go, and then you got to back up and get a head start, and then you can get a little more out and a little more out and a little more out. And I feel like that's what I do on my scripts when I get to a spot where the drift is just too deep, so to speak. And sometimes I'll go back a little bit, and in this case and in many other cases, I go right back to the beginning and start all over again. So that's kind of what has happened here. I don't know what the point of that long discussion was. A couple of days are fine. I have no idea if this is to any, a brand new newbie screenwriter, as I've said before, maybe someone who doesn't even have interest in writing. They just wonder what the writing process is like. I mean, maybe they're like, this person can't wait for each day's episode to come out on YouTube. But based on the number of views, I would say that that's extremely unlikely. And the more I think about this and write and commentate on it, the more I realize that, anyone who has done any amount of writing, had any success at all, or feels like he or she knows her craft or his craft pretty well, is probably A, not going to watch this, and B, probably won't get a lot out of it other than maybe commiserating and saying, oh, I'm not the only one who has these kind of problems. But I mean, 136 days is just crazy town in terms of how far along I am, or I should say am not. Of course, remembering that after about 105 days, I thought I was done, and then the axe fell. Okay. All right. So this is, again, kind of working on Abby and Lexi talking, bringing up the idea that if Lexi tells Jake the new news, that she knows what's going to happen. So it kind of shows a little bit of insecurity, but yeah, I don't think it would be, even if they had a super solid relationship and she was a very grounded and pretty semi-independent young woman, I guess, as much as you can be when you're 18, she would still be concerned about this. What am I trying to do? Literally ready. On the nose, on the nose. That is crazy. I've literally rewritten this sentence like wow. I'm just kind of speechless at my, I'm not saying I'm proud or ashamed of it, but I mean, that's just crazy. I'm just rewriting this to get it to the right spot. And do I know what I want to say? I just don't know how to say it, or I don't know what I want to say, or what I need to say to move the scene in the right direction, and that's what's making me rewrite that. And again, this is sped up 5 times, so I don't know how long I spent on Abby's little thing about it sucks that your birth mother abandoned you, blah, blah, blah. So now she's laying out the fact. Well, this is just a rewritten version, so I'm not breaking any ground here. She's just saying, look, it could go well, it could go bad, but anyways, what you'll get no matter what is closure, or I guess it wouldn't be closure if she decided to keep seeing her. But anyways, wow, 136, pretty big day. I did it all in one fell swoop. Let me just pat myself on the back a little bit. And let me pat you on the back for coming with me and staying with me and hanging in there on a screenwriter's journey.